it's helpful to resolve things if you can before you go to bed, just so you're not carrying all that anger and frustration and sadness and yuckiness with you.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can last a lifetime. Once you say those words, it's really hard to take them back.
If we are too emotional, we are not going to have a productive conversation.
We want to hear from you. What is your communication style? Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker in Colorado, and I'm here with my co-host, Beth Gustin, a licensed professional counselor, also in Colorado. And so we're going to talk about communication today. In the past, we've talked about boundaries, which we feel like is a building block to any relationship. It's important to set those limits. We teach other people how to treat us. Boundaries, another important thing is communication. How are you able to communicate those boundaries or communicate in a healthy way to other people what you want to get out of a relationship, or just in general, communicating interest, communicating positives is definitely important in order to create a healthy foundation.
I agree. And I think one thing that comes to mind for me about this is different styles of communication. So you've got passive, aggressive, and assertive are the typical three styles that I think about when it comes to communication. And how do we best communicate our needs in a way so they can be heard and met? And we can go a ton of different directions with this. But one thing I think about when it comes to communicating anything is using I statements and trying to frame things so that we are acknowledging the parts that we own and also phrasing things in a way that are not going to be defensive to somebody else. So if I say something like, you always leave the cupboard doors open, I'm sick of hitting my head because it hurts. That's great. I'm communicating that I'm in pain and I'm grumpy, but that would be seen as more of an aggressive way to communicate my point. Whereas a passive way might be, I don't like those cupboard doors being left open. I'm not really stating what that's about for me, except I don't like it. Or even passive would be not saying anything at all. And so the more, I think, healthy way to communicate this would be, it really hurts my head when I run into cupboard doors. Could we please close them when we're done being in the cupboard? And that way it's a little more on me, but also stating my need in a way that's hopefully going to be heard better and understood by the receiver better.
Right. And I would venture to say that even, Beth, could be a assertive statement that you said. You're asserting your needs in the moment. And I think some people get assertiveness mixed up with aggression, right? Just because you're assertive and voicing what you need in that moment with those I feel statements, it doesn't mean that you're being mean or you're not being considerate or respectful. Because the example that Beth gave, right, the I feel with the cabinet example, that's clearly stated in a way where it's showing what's making you feel that way and what needs to be done differently. And a passive approach, I just want to add to it, is if you don't say anything at all, what happens? People tend to hold it in. And I always say what goes down must come back up. So eventually, whenever you're getting passive, a person can only take so much. And then that's when that snippiness can start to arise. So really trying to figure out how can I be able to voice what I need to voice in a way that is communicating what I need to communicate, but in a way where it's not harmful to somebody else.
Right. I think when it comes to communication, like Robin said at the intro of this, it affects a lot of aspects of our lives. And whether it's to a romantic partner, to a family member, to a person in school or class with you, these interactions arise all the time. And none of us get this communication thing right 100% of the time. And so I think it is really figuring out what is it you are trying to say? What do you want the outcome of the conversation to be? And can you find a way to bring it up that's going to be not critical, but also helping you assert your point? And I also find it's helpful to have some of these conversations, neutral location, if the house is too charged, or having them at a time where you both are able to be present and listen to each other. Over dinner can be good for this, but finding a time where you come together and neither one of you is focused on work or packing the kids' lunch or whatever it is that's getting in the way.
Right. Going off of that, Beth, is I feel whenever there's some type of misunderstanding, people have this push and pull. And it's like where people kind of may resort back to like a kid-like state, right? It's trying to be able to prove their point and not necessarily hearing what the other person is saying. And it's really their inner child coming out and trying to it can come across as being a tantrum in some ways. And so if you feel like either you're getting to that point or you can tell that the other person's getting to that point, then it's okay to step away. And so in terms of you noticing what that is like for you physically, for some people, their heart races, they have knots in their stomach. And so whenever you start to feel that, then it's okay to say, you know what, I feel really frustrated right now and I really need some space. How about we talk about this later? Or, if you recognize that in the other person saying, right now I feel like you're frustrated, or right now I feel like you're really angry. How about we come back and talk about this later? So really naming that emotion, and then also creating space and making sure that you come back to it so that it won't be an argument filled where it's kind of like a tantrum and people are just going at each other versus talking to each other.
I agree. And one thing I'd like to add to that is when I talk about this with my clients, I talk about calling a timeout and doing what Robin just said, but also setting a time to come back to that in like the next 24 hours. Because if you let it go too long, it's not going to be as easy to talk about it because your memory is going to not remember details properly, or it's more time passes. And so if you can set a time in the next 24 hours to come back together and finish the conversation, that's going to help get it resolved more quickly.
Right. I agree with that, because if you let too much time go by, then it falls to the wayside, or again, it gets pushed down to unresolved issues, and that can cause bitterness. So one thing that I mentioned to my clients is try not to go to bed angry and try and have it resolved before you go to sleep. But then also too, I was thinking, because what if the argument happens a few hours before you go to bed, or a few minutes?
I do think it's helpful to resolve things if you can before you go to bed, just so you're not carrying all that anger and frustration and sadness and yuckiness with you. If you can't resolve it before bed, though, I think it's very important then to set that kind of time out and let it go until you can both come back together and acknowledge that, you may not have the best night of sleep, unfortunately, but you do have a plan to revisit it and get it resolved.
Right. And so maybe if you can't even talk it out before you go to sleep, then journal it, right? So pretend that you're voicing what you need to voice to that person, and that way you can be able to get it out that way. And hopefully that can kind of help you get some of what you need to say out. So
I want to go back for just a minute and talk about being aware of your signs that you are needing to take a break from a conversation. I think that was a really important point that Robin brought up, because if we are too emotional, we are not going to have a productive conversation. And so what are your signs that you need to step away and take a break? Are your hands clenched? Is your jaw tight? Are you breathing more rapidly? Learn what your signs are to where it's not going to be a healthy conversation if your voice is rising. Are you using swear words? What is it for you? And pay attention to that. And step back. It's okay to say, I'm going to take a 5-minute breather and I'll come back. Or I need to take a walk. Can we talk about this in half an hour? Or I'm too emotional and I can't discuss this. Can we please come back tomorrow when I've had some time to think about it and get some solutions? In short, being aware of your emotional barometer and being aware of when it's time to say, I'm taking a step back, I'm taking a break, or if the other person is getting a little amped up and maybe they're name calling, or they're doing something that's uncomfortable to you, to say, hey, I need to take a step back because this isn't helpful or productive. I don't feel like I'm being respected right now. Setting those boundaries like we talked about in a previous episode.
Yeah. Because what is the saying? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can last a lifetime. And so once you say those words, it's really hard to take them back. And I know there's a lot of people say, well, I didn't mean that. And so but once it's out, it's hard to etch away from somebody's memory. So just being very respectful. And again, arguments can be healthy in a way if it's dealt in a way where it's talking to one another and not trying to belittle or bring somebody down. Because you're going to get upset with people. I mean, it's going to happen, but it's how you are able to navigate those arguments that really matter.
I agree. And there's a lot of different directions we can go with this topic. And I do think the first step of this is, how do you communicate? Are there things you need to change about how you communicate? Can you practice the I statements? I feel blank when blank, so what I need is blank. Is kind of a basic framework for that.
Yeah. And so we want to hear from you. What is your communication style? How do you handle disagreements or arguments when they arise? We always say in episodes, we want to hear from you. If you have any topics of discussions or questions, definitely reach out through email or phone number that's listed within this podcast.
Yes. Please let us know what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to see in the future. As always, please take care and stay grounded.
Until next time, take care.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself. Oh yeah.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.